James Gunn wasted absolutely no time pulling the trigger on this sequel. The moment Superman landed with audiences, he locked in the follow-up. Man of Tomorrow is officially set for July 2027, which honestly says everything about where DC Studios is right now. For the first time in years, they actually seem confident in what they're building. David Corenswet is back as Clark, Rachel Brosnahan returns as Lois, Nicholas Hoult is once again stepping into the role of Lex Luthor, and the headline addition is Lars Eidinger as Brainiac. This is legitimately the first time we're getting Brainiac on the big screen, which feels insane when you think about how iconic he is in the comics. Before Eidinger got announced back in December, the fan casting conversation went completely wild. Matt Smith's name was all over the place, people kept pushing for Giancarlo Esposito, and there was a decent chunk of the fanbase convinced Gunn would bring back Chukwudi Iwuji after what he did in Peacemaker and Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So when Eidinger got the nod, it caught people off guard, but in the best way possible. He's not the obvious choice, and that's exactly the kind of move Gunn tends to make. He's pulling from every era of Brainiac lore. The early Otto Binder science fiction stories, the much darker Marv Wolfman interpretations, the animated series versions, even the recent absolute Brainiac run. That mix alone tells you this isn't going to be some generic villain with a one-dimensional plan. Whatever we end up seeing is going to feel layered, genuinely unsettling, and completely different from anything Superman has ever gone up against in live action. Gunn isn't just producing from the sidelines either. He's writing and directing Man of Tomorrow himself, which is a massive deal. That means this isn't getting passed around to different filmmakers or reshaped by studio notes. It's his vision start to finish. On the music front, John Murphy and David Fleming are expected to return as composers, which makes total sense. Their score helped establish the emotional tone of the first film, blending heroic beats with a modern sensibility. And keeping that continuity matters if DC wants this universe to feel connected. The core premise is pretty straightforward at this point. Superman and Lex Luthor are forced into an uncomfortable alliance to face a threat that neither one of them can stop on their own. That threat is Brainiac, a cold and tyrannical alien intelligence whose arrival immediately raises the stakes beyond anything Earth-based. This isn't some villain with a grudge against Metropolis or a personal vendetta against Clark. This is a cosmic threat with goals that stretch far beyond one planet, and that's exactly why these two bitter enemies have to put their hatred aside, at least temporarily. One of the most exciting confirmations came from teaser artwork Jim Lee released alongside the title announcement. That image heavily implies that Lex is finally going to wear his classic war suit from the comics. Fans have been waiting decades to see that done properly in a live-action movie. Not a watered-down version, not a quick Easter egg, but the real thing. If that armor actually plays a significant role in the story, it completely reframes Lex as more than just a scheming genius. He becomes a legitimate physical threat standing shoulder to shoulder with Superman against something like Brainiac. Nicholas Hoult has already started bulking up, which got confirmed recently through a gym session posted by Paolo Machidi. Hoult's DCU journey will continue after his cameo in Peacemaker Season 2, which will show where Lex stands after the events of the first Superman film. But when he and Corenswet reunite in 2027, the dynamic between them is going to take a completely different direction. Isabel Merced is officially coming back as Hawkgirl, and Frank Grillo's Rick Flag is also returning. Gunn has confirmed that Batman and Wonder Woman will not appear in this movie, but there is one female character currently being cast whose identity DC Studios has kept completely under wraps. There's been no official word yet on whether Eddie Gathegy's Mr. Terrific, Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner, or Anthony Carrigan's Metamorpho will return, but it would be genuinely shocking if at least a few of them didn't show up. Gunn loves building ensembles, and these characters are already established in the world. Bringing them back, even in smaller capacities, helps make the universe feel lived in and evolving. There's also been a lot of quiet buzz around Supergirl. Some storyboards that appeared in the Superman special features seem to hint that Millie Alcock might factor into this story somehow. Nothing has been officially announced, but the implication is pretty hard to ignore. With her solo film already in development, it would make complete sense to use Man of Tomorrow as a way to further integrate her into the larger DCU. She doesn't need to be front and center, but her presence alone would help bridge the gap between grounded conflicts on Earth and the bigger cosmic dangers starting to creep into the picture. Narratively, Supergirl feels like the connective tissue between Superman and Man of Tomorrow. Kara showed up in the first movie, her standalone film is coming, and it fits Gunn's pattern of introducing characters early so they can naturally slide into bigger storylines down the road. Her involvement in the sequel hasn't been confirmed, but logically, it feels almost inevitable. She could be the first one to sense that something is watching Earth from the shadows. Maybe she warns Clark that a massive threat is approaching, even if she doesn't fully understand what it is yet. That alone would escalate the tension without spelling everything out immediately. There's also a bit of DC history worth pointing out here. For years, there were rumors that a sequel to Henry Cavill's Man of Steel was supposed to center on Brainiac and might have even carried the Man of Tomorrow title. That plan obviously never materialized and eventually morphed into the overcrowded mess that was Batman vs. Superman, which tried to juggle Batman, Wonder Woman, Doomsday, and way too much mythology all at once. There were even whispers at one point that Batman vs. Superman itself could have been called Man of Tomorrow, though nothing was ever confirmed. Now, years later, the title finally exists for real as part of Gunn's Gods and Monsters chapter. He keeps insisting he's not structuring the DCU in rigid phases like Marvel, but honestly, the roadmap is still pretty visible. You can feel the direction it's heading. What really works in DC's favor right now is timing. The sequel is dropping while the first movie is still fresh in people's minds. Superman didn't cross $1 billion, but it didn't need to. People responded to it. It gave audiences a hopeful, genuinely heroic Superman again, without pretending the Snyder era didn't exist. That version had its moment, did its thing, and still has its fans. But this new take feels lighter, more optimistic, and closer to what a lot of people grew up loving about the character. That goodwill is real, and DC is being smart by capitalizing on it immediately instead of letting 5 or 6 years go by and losing all that momentum. At the same time, Gunn has made it clear that Man of Tomorrow isn't a traditional sequel. It's technically a continuation, but the story stands on its own. You won't need to rewatch the first film to understand what's happening, which is an interesting approach. It tells you this movie is aiming for something bigger in scope. Same cast, same world, but a completely different type of story. Everyone outside the core trio is still up in the air, which keeps things flexible as the DCU continues to expand. The villain was always the biggest mystery, but honestly, it stopped being much of a mystery pretty quickly. Gunn straight up said that Superman and Lex would be forced to work together against a threat far bigger than either of them, and that description basically screams Brainiac. Even so, the larger picture is obvious. Man of Tomorrow is moving forward with real momentum, and compared to DC's messy recent history, that kind of stability is almost surreal. Brainiac has had countless motivations across decades of comics. He studies civilizations, collects knowledge, hunts for advanced technology, shrinks entire cities, and preserves them like specimens. Kandor is the most famous example, and it's practically inseparable from his entire mythology. Earth checks every single box, especially now. Gunn has an enormous sandbox to play in because Brainiac has been reimagined so many different ways over the years. But at his core, he's always been a cold, calculating conqueror, and introducing him immediately shifts the scale from local heroics to galactic stakes. One of the most compelling aspects here is the forced partnership between Superman and Lex. In the comics, this dynamic has played out more times than most people realize, including in very recent runs. Gunn clearly loves uncomfortable alliances, and the tension between Corenswet and Holt was already one of the strongest elements of the first movie. Forcing them into a situation where they have no choice but to cooperate adds instant dramatic weight. Gunn has talked before about loving 80s comics, All-Star Superman, Birthright, and those classic Brainiac storylines. He's also mentioned drawing inspiration from things like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings when it comes to complex character dynamics and large-scale conflicts. If Man of Tomorrow leans into that approach, this could end up feeling like a political thriller wrapped inside a superhero film. Everything points toward a modernized version of Brainiac's assault on Earth and Metropolis. This also feels like the perfect moment to finally bring Lex's power armor into live action in a way that actually matters. Fans have been waiting forever to see that executed properly. The story practically writes itself. The enemy of my enemy becomes my ally, but only for as long as the threat exists. Every agreement is fragile. Every scene carries the possibility of betrayal. If Gunn nails this, Man of Tomorrow could easily become the first genuine event film of the new DCU. What makes it all click is how naturally it connects back to the first movie without being a direct continuation. By the end of Superman, Clark fully embraces his role. He's still learning, still making mistakes, but he becomes a symbol, and that kind of emergence doesn't go unnoticed. A new power suddenly appears on Earth, strong enough to alter the trajectory of an entire planet. From a cosmic perspective, that's not just interesting. In classic fashion, he could arrive to study Metropolis, Metropolis, shrink it down, and attempt to add it to his collection just like he did with Kandor. That makes his arrival feel justified, not arbitrary. It's a direct consequence of the events in the first movie. Even though Man of Tomorrow doesn't operate like a typical sequel, Lex's involvement is just as critical. No matter how much he despises Superman, Luthor is intelligent enough to recognize an extinction-level threat when he sees one. If something out there can obliterate Metropolis, Superman, and Lex himself in a single move, personal hatred becomes irrelevant. That moment of mutual acknowledgement is where their alliance begins. They don't trust each other, they never will, but necessity forces them into the same space, fighting on the same side, at least for the time being. That friction is pure narrative fuel. In the end, Brainiac's motivation being directly tied to Superman's emergence is about as classic as it gets. Superman becomes too visible, too influential, too powerful, too quickly. Earth stands out, Metropolis stands out, and that attention comes with consequences. Superman is the reason the threat arrives, and he's also the only one capable of stopping it. That creates a clean, logical chain reaction that makes the world feel interconnected and alive. Man of Tomorrow doesn't just move the story forward, it expands the universe, raises the stakes, and makes it crystal clear that every heroic action has ripple effects far beyond Earth. This is the kind of sequel that doesn't just follow up on what came before, it fundamentally shifts what the DCU is capable of, and if Gunn pulls it off, it could set the tone for everything that comes after.